really is at the core of what's needed to bring purpose to the forefront in the workplace right now. And that it is really important for leaders to be modeling this behavior themselves and for them to be talking about what they're doing very publicly so that people understand that this isn't just something that's sort of asked of them, but it's something that authentically the whole organization is doing. I think the other big piece is we need to really invest right now in human skills. One of the biggest barriers to purpose in our work is just how much our managers, our people lack basic human skills, basic communication skills, basic emotional skills. And all this talk of purpose, et cetera, doesn't really have the impact that's needed unless people are able to show up as, human beings and to not be in a state of constant fear. They need to be able to move into a state of hope, a state of what's possible. And that, one of the key things we need to do as talent leaders is to create that kind of environment where that is possible.
I think it's really interesting that you use the term human skills and not soft skills. We hear a lot about soft skills versus hard skills. But I think your term of human skills is actually probably more appropriate.
Yeah, soft skills is a problematic term because it tends to undervalue them, especially when it's compared to hard skills. And if you look at, the research is all showing what CEOs are wanting is the, human skills, and that's where the core skills gap is. And the challenge is that teaching human skills is very different than teaching technical skills. And we tend to apply technical skills training modality to human skills. And we don't recognize that human skills are much more tied into psychology and therefore just need a totally different process.
We're doing some work on skills right now, and most organizations divide skills into soft skills and hard skills. What's really interesting, though, is the way that you measure hard skills, the way you think about hard skills is the way you train hard skills is completely different than the way that you measure and train and think about softer skills or what you're calling human skills.
No, and they show up so differently based on the environment. Whereas knowing how to, code in Python tends to show up similarly in every environment. Knowing how to communicate effectively with different people, it shows up so differently. We're so triggered by different things.
Chris always asks his guests where their sense of purpose comes from, or if there was a person or event that had prompted you to sort of spend your life doing what you're doing. But how did you decide to spend your life this way? Or did you just stumble into it?
I think it's both. So I think at some level, I'm just a curious bastard and I just constantly just follow where my curiosity takes me. And I'm constantly asking questions and turning over stones and then sort of saying, what if you did this? What if you did that? And then all of a sudden it's 3 years later and I'm in the throes of it. So a lot of it just is following that curiosity thread, which I think brings in your values, it brings in your purpose all into that, thread. I think there are a bunch of people who have really inspired me in this work. My grandfather is sort of the one I talk about most. He worked for President Kennedy and helped build the Peace Corps, which, to him was really about how do you help bring different cultures together through meaningful connection. And then his work running the Aspen Institute for 25 years, which was again about having people from different, political backgrounds, professions, et cetera, coming together and finding shared humanity and sort of coming up with solutions together. So that sort of is so tied to my work of this idea of helping people find their better selves and bringing it into that public square, finding ways to connect with other people. But then my parents had a big role in this as well. My father was a PhD in higher education administration, so sort of OD, and just always loved the work around organizational development. And both my parents, were Jewish by descent, but active Buddhists. And I think that combination of sort of Buddhist and Jewish upbringing also led me to a lot of this work and the idea of how do we repair the world? How do we be more conscious? How can we be constantly on a path to, some version of enlightenment? So these things all really sort of come together to sort of point me, to where I am today. But I would say curiosity has been definitely the thing, and it hasn't killed this cat yet, but I'm sure one day it will.
Aaron, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your current venture. We talked about Taproot earlier on. Can you tell us what you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, so Imperative is a venture-backed technology company that has built a platform that enables a company to match their employees on an ongoing basis in peer coaching conversations. So basically conversations to support each other, to stand back and reflect on what's going on. So creating that space for reflection to sort of pull out of the hamster wheel, and then to just build these deep, real, true human connections throughout their organization. So it's a platform that's really being used to help, managers connect with other managers and really support each other, or to get people from different backgrounds to really connect inside the organization. And it really is acting as sort of a counterbalance to most technology, which has been about sort of preying on sort of a lot of fear and anxiety and just sort of sending out information after information after information. We're trying to take the space back for real human connection and finding that there's just such hunger for that, both from employees, but also from leadership to be able to do that. And we really see with imperative that it's going to become the backbone of the culture of organizations, that this intentional reflection and connection time is going to soon be as common as sort of a one-on-one that we now consider to sort of a standard part of business practice, because the neuroscience, the positive psychology, the change management, it's all pointing to this as really the only way to do it. So, we're working with companies now deploying this. We're seeing that it's, creating like profound relationships. It's creating behavior change. It's having people take ownership of their fulfillment and their effectiveness. And in that whole process, it's giving, whole new insights to companies about what's going on with their employees and what they really care about. So I'm just, really hopeful of, that this is really going to be the start of a major next chapter in purpose and the humanizing of work, and really encouraged by the reaction to it so far.
Really exciting stuff and on theme.
On curiosity.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for your time today and sort of giving us this primer. And we are going to go off now and have some conversations. In fact, we've already started with some really interesting people who are putting some of your ideas into practice and learning as we go. So thanks a lot for your time, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
I loved it. Thanks for putting this together.
Okay, well, I'm here with Danny and Stacia, and we're going to debrief the amazing conversation that we just had with Aaron Hurst. And I wondered, Danny, what were your top takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, I think there were probably two. The first one is Aaron using the term human skills. I think we've been calling them soft skills for a really long time. But the fact that he labeled them human skills kind of hit it home to me how important those skills are. And then he followed up with a discussion on how those human skills are really necessary for our managers to have in order to sort of instill the idea of hope in the people that we work with and that work for us or report to us, to be able to make purpose even possible.
Yeah, and I liked how he also said that how you teach those skills is not the same as how you teach the technical skills. That's been our focus for the last couple of decades. Like we need new, fresh approaches to really helping people build those skills. It's very situational.
I loved that. Yeah, and also how it is really all about environment. Like purpose isn't something that just magically happens. We have to actively create the environment necessary for that to be fulfilled.
Stacia, I thought pretty hard about how to sequence all these conversations. I thought Aaron was a good kind of second person to share our conversation with, because he really takes a broad look, and he's obviously a very, very deep thinker on the topic of purpose. What were the big takeaways for you?
One thing he said that really struck me and built on what we talked about in the research was the psychological needs aspect of purpose. So, he talked about it, as we were talking a few moments ago, Chris, about a potential downside being that we're seeing psychological manipulation sometimes in things like Facebook or the attention economy, et cetera. But then the other side of that coin, as he kind of phrased it, was this idea of using work to fulfill those psychological needs. And in the research, we talked about that as, really organizations taking a new role in enabling people to fulfill their purpose. So I hadn't thought about kind of the dark side, or even really those two things being part of the same coin. But the way that he phrased that and shared them being tied together, was really interesting for me. So that was one thing. The second thing was talking about this concept of purpose as enabling us to have really more human conversations and relationships. And the idea that if we are able to do that, we will just unleash greater potential in our people. One, because they'll have new ideas. And then second, because they'll be more open and in the right mindset to hear those new ideas. And so thinking about that concept and then rolling it across organizations and really across our whole economy, I thought was a more compelling, or another compelling reason for the impact and importance of purpose.
Yeah, and I loved how he brought this home and put, talent and HR and learning professionals kind of on the front line of creating the environments where sort of purpose-driven work can happen. He talked about moving away from the idea of human resources and really humanizing work practice and how we think about the people that we work with. I thought that was really great. And it goes right back to that piece of work, Danny, you did on what separates humans from other creatures and the importance of bringing humanity into the workplace.
Yeah, the other thing I think that puts this squarely into HR's realm is he mentioned a survey that he and his team had done about the number one barrier to fulfillment at work. And he talked about how their people's top answer was they were their number one barrier. And so if you think about what learning can enable, one, it's an understanding and a self-awareness of that. But then two, it's the skills, the capabilities, the knowledge, the access to information to help people kind of get out of their own way in fulfilling what their own purpose is. And that is a responsibility that I think sits very squarely within learning and then also within talent and HR more broadly.
He also helped me think a little bit around this. He helped me clarify, as big thinkers often do, the difference between purpose and cause. And he told a good anecdote. There are lots of people who work in not-for-profit organizations, on important causes, who are still very unfulfilled in their work. And I thought there was a good section of conversation there that helped me just kind of tease apart the difference between, working with purpose and working for a particular cause.
Yeah, and just to foreshadow another conversation, I think we heard that as well from Deborah Quazza when she was talking about purpose and profit and how they certainly can go together, but don't mix up what kind of organization you're working for. So I think we started this whole podcast series, Chris, where we talked about this line and the continuum of purpose and profit. And was that the right framing? And I think we decided no, but there still is a need to acknowledge and understand what type of organization you're working in and, what the role is of purpose and how does that complement profit.
I think the other interesting thing that he sort of closed on a little bit was this idea of regulation. And Danny, you and I have talked about purpose washing before and whether this is all just an attempt at marketing or not. I think as we go through the series, I'm getting more and more convinced that this is a genuine mode of operation for at least some companies. But he talked about the sort of impedance mismatch a little bit between innovation and changes and the ability of governments and regulations to sort of keep up. And he had a bit of a warning around that. It's like we're going to need to regulate around some of this innovation if we're going to protect people's rights in the workplace.
Yeah, and I actually think that's a double-edged sword. I mean, Stacia probably knows a lot more about this, but the idea of ethics and data, for example, data can absolutely help somebody find their purpose within an organization and propel the organization forward. But on the other side of that, there are all kinds of problems with sharing data widely, making it available more widely, et cetera.
Yeah, I did think though that he had some interesting perspectives in general about regulation and how the economy that we're in right now, the scale and the impact of change is so much faster and greater than what we've seen in the past. I hadn't really, he changed my thinking and thinking about some aspects of that. I don't know that he changed my thinking on the answer, because I don't know that anybody has it, but I thought that was one of the most interesting parts and maybe one of the things I'll take away the most, to be honest.
This idea of purpose and regulation and some of the changes that we've seen with people, with organizations sort of taking up the standard of purpose, it feels a little dangerous to me. And the reason is, if you think about J&J, for example, they've had the same purpose for 100 years. And people have gone to work for them because of their purpose. And they've changed lives because of their purpose. And the whole reason that purpose works for them is sort of all altruistic. You know what I mean? And so I wonder what happens when we start to regulate the idea of purpose. What happens when governments finally catch up and we start saying, yes, these people deserve, we need organizations to step in and take the role that community used to play, or we start regulating to the extent that the altruism goes away. I don't know. What do you guys think about it?
I think it's a really important question. You think like work is highly regulated, right? A lot of HR's job over the last, let's say 40 or 50 years has been to make sure that in the workplace, we adhere to a set of regulations. And